What I've always strived to do is not be an expert in the ninja. I never claimed to be an expert. I always consider myself to be a historical researcher because I'm not paid by university. I'm not a historian in that sense. I was one of those guys training in ninjutsu, but I just came out and said, well, if I dig, I can find the truth. So I'm just a normal guy, and I'm a non-Japanese. I don't speak Japanese, but as I went along, I did different things. My experience has grown and my ability has grown. But the point I try to keep in mind is that there are no experts in this field, and I'm just leading the field because I'm the first one to do some actual work inside of it. So it turns out that my dream is to bring the historical ninja to the world, and I thought everybody's going to love this. There's lots of people interested in the ninja. Of course they're going to be like, wow, historical ninjutsu. Turns out they don't like it. Nobody wants to get involved with it. It's too complicated, it's too difficult to do for them. Nobody's that interested. So I've literally killed all interest in the ninja. So where do we find real ninjutsu? You have all these masters, or so-called masters, teaching the ways of the ninja, and I came to the conclusion that they were all fake. And I realized the truth is not in any living person. We have to speak to the real ninja, but of course they're hundreds of years in the grave and hundreds of years dead, so the only way to speak to them is to read what they wrote down. We have to go back to the original scrolls. So that means we have to go on a search for all the scrolls in Japan, compile them, and listen to the voices of ancient ninja masters. My earliest memory is actually of me in a toy shop with my grandfather, and I must have been about 4 or 5 years old. And he is looking down at me and he says, which toys do you want? Do you want the army figures or do you want the ninja figures? And I remember thinking and looking at him and saying, of course the ninja figures, you know I love ninja. Ninjas were massive at that point, they were huge in the UK, and I continued with them. Everybody else changed and the fad changed, and it just stuck with me. I never changed.
So martial arts wise, I did the same as Anthony. We both did Bujinkan from the early 2000s. We did it for a few years, and we learned a lot from like Hatsumi books, from Stephen Hayes books, and we had an instructor who was a ninjutsu instructor. And we just trained wherever we could. We'd probably train between 4 and 7 times a week when we first started out. But I think the biggest point for me is Anthony's first trip to Japan. He was so excited to go, and he was going to go train with Hatsumi, he was going to go train in Bujinkan, and it was like, we were all so excited because it was like, he's going to learn from the real ninja now.
So after I did my first degree, I got a job with a company called Nova, and I flew to Japan, and I lived in Kitakogane, and there I worked as an English teacher, and I went to study and find the real ninjas.
When you get hired by Nova, they hire people from all over the world as long as you're a native English speaker. So it was Anthony, myself, and one other American in this 3-bedroom apartment in Kitakogane. And I remember from the beginning, Anthony and I just clicked because we wanted to have as much of a cultural experience as we could. So that meant that we lived more simply, we tried all kinds of Japanese food, we ate sushi once a week, we tried to cook it at home, we practiced sitting on the floor because as Westerners that was not normal for us. So at all meals we sat on the floor, we moved the furniture around so it was more open space, celebrated all the holidays, made many Japanese friends. All our students would take us out, we practiced calligraphy. And whenever possible, we would attend, Japanese cultural events. He would share all kinds of historical knowledge whenever we visited a temple or a shrine. And our year together was spent just making new friends and, as much as possible, immersing ourselves in Japanese culture.
First day, I was new in Japan. I should have been putting my registration cards in and doing my paperwork, but I just forgot that, went straight to the dojo. And I was expecting some form of discipline, a well-organized society, or communal space. But when I opened the door, all I could smell was American hamburgers, sweaty feet because the shoes were piled up and out of order. It was dusty, it was dirty, and it was full of really overweight foreign people, sort of sweating. And the first thing that happened was that a Japanese man ran over to me and asked me for money. He asked me my name, where I was from. I was expecting to have to show who I was and be very, go through interviews and everything. No, money, money, money. Okay, get you going, in you go in. That was it. And I came away from that thinking, something's wrong here. Something's not right, even from the beginning.
It was before Skype was out, and he sent me an email and he was like, Jay, something just doesn't add up. And he was like, I can't talk about it too much, but there's just something off kilter. And we had to wait for him to get back from Japan before we could actually really discuss. And then the more we discussed, the more he showed me, it was quite obvious that just something wasn't right. There was something just not right in the ninja community.
The next thing was to try and find actual ninja information. Where can I get it? So I'm working as an English teacher. At this point, I'd been back to the UK and I came back to Japan to work for a company called Shane. Now, I went in there, I was, as normal, doing my English teacher thing, and I'd been to the different museums and I got photocopies of a couple of pages from Ninja Scrolls, from pamphlets and that type of thing. So I just photocopied them at school and I gave them out to all of my students and said, for your homework, please translate this one page of a Ninja Scroll. Now, nearly everyone came back, and remember, these people are native Japanese who speak English. They came back and said, I can't do that, that's too difficult. Homework after homework came back, can't do it. Except there was a lady called Yoshie Minami, and she came, perfectly translated in great English, just went down and went, yeah, that's no problem. Let's go for a coffee. So I went for a coffee with Yoshie, and it turns out she's got a really good degree from a high-level university in translation and linguistics. So it's absolutely perfect. So we got together, started talking, and discussed what we would do about this. Now, we actually translated possibly the most complicated scroll first. Now, we chose this because it was short, but it turns out that it was really difficult. And when we did this, we did it by email because there was no Skype or anything. We just did it by email. And eventually we went through, did everything, and we sent it to the publisher Tuttle, and within record time, within 11 days, we'd signed a contract and let's publish this book. So that was approximately 10 years ago. Since then, I've now published 20 books. I average about 2 books a year. Some of them are translations, some of them are my own academic work, some of them are easy to understand books on Japanese culture for the average reader. So I've set myself the goal of answering the question, what did the samurai and ninja actually do? And through my books, the different levels of books, I'm going to produce that answer for the world to read and understand. Ninja scrolls are rare. They're extremely rare. I have estimated that there are about 300 to 500 scrolls. Now, considering there are hundreds of thousands of Japanese scrolls, possibly millions of original scrolls, there are only a couple or a few hundred ninja scrolls. Now, the problem here is that some scrolls only have a little bit of ninja information in, some of them have lots. So what I've been doing is spending a vast amount of money, to be fair, traveling Japan, going to private, public libraries and also private people, trying to get the scrolls out of them, get photocopies. So bit by bit, we've traveled the country, we've filled all the forms in, gone through all the processes, and then got printouts of the scrolls or digital copies.
Okay, I don't care who you are. The military writes everything down. They have publications and books and pamphlets. Everything's written down. You can't fart without being told how to do that in the military, right? Japanese military doesn't seem to be any different. Whether it's 300 years ago or present day, they wrote everything down. Now it's just digging through, 10 million houses looking for that information.
So once we've collected these scrolls, we choose which ones we are going to publish. Which one is the best for the audience. We go through, we get the first draft of the book together, and then we start the laborious task of individually going through each line for connotations and hidden meaning, or where it crosses with other elements, and then we pull it all together and we put it into a package for the publisher, and then the publisher decides whether they want to bring it out as a book or not. So what we have, this is my collection of original scrolls. Now actually it's not a massive collection because ninja scrolls and scrolls related to the ninja are extremely rare, so mainly you get photocopies. This is a facsimile, which is not an original, but it's a facsimile of the original, which is the Ban Senshukai, sometimes known as the Man Senshukai. And this was written by Fujibayashi Yasutake in 1676. Now this is a limited edition copy of the manual as it originally was.
With all the hubbub and all the controversy around Anthony's work, it's still the only English translation of the Ban Senshukai that is available for English audiences. And I think people need to comprehend exactly how important that was, because the translation of the Ban Senshukai actually forced the Japanese researchers to make certain moves of their own. It absolutely impacted and influenced certain decisions and certain trends from the Japanese historians. So there's been sort of a shift in Japan that Anthony's work, my work, is the factor that pushed it in the West.
So we have by no means published everything yet, but we've got the broadest picture of what ninjas actually are out there in the English language. So this is what most people are interested in when they deal with the Ban Senshukai. They get the rope ladders, the bridges, everything that they can cross. These are rafts that they used. These are secret tools for swimming in water. They would use these when they sit on this seat. So the person would sit here and then they would paddle with these shoes.
But I think that's how we're going to get as close as possible, is to getting more input, despite lack of not being able to speak Japanese or some other things, that he's had this ability to find people who can do these things and to create a team. And there's some cool people on his team. Yoshie is awesome, and her even some of the people who aren't totally on Anthony's side have complimented her translations. And then you have Miyako, and she's involved with some of the armor communities over in Japan, and she's got her martial arts background, and she's brought over information from that community. And then you have Yamamoto-san at the Eunji Temple, and he gives input from a Buddhist monk perspective.
And Anthony, he's a great we'll call it a director. He can point the way, he can find information, gets it translated into easy to understand bits and pieces. I'm just a martial artist, and I find the Book of Samurai and the Shoninki and the Banshin Shukai all very interesting, and pulling out all the physical bits and understanding how to make fire and how to carry candles, food rations, that's all interesting to me.
Ninjas became popular in Japan first. That is where it became, and of course they had really famous comic books for Japanese people. They had a run of movies and films where ninjas were everywhere, and that created the stereotype of the ninja. It's not historical. However, there was a man called Stephen Hayes who in the 1970s moved from America to Japan to train with one of these so-called ninja masters, the same one I went to train with. However, he was one of the first Americans to do this, and he collected as much information as he could on the ninja, and in fairness to him, he collected it from the Japanese. He collected it from Japanese books. He didn't make it up, and then he brought it back to his wife and friends, and together they translated it, and he came back to the USA and then published in Black Belt magazine, where it became very popular, and then he published fully as a book, and it was sensational. He was one of the best sellers of the 1980s, 1990s in the martial arts world, and from there we had the ninja boom, and everybody was practicing this modern hand-to-hand ninja combat system, believing it was very old.
Stephen Hayes, who was the other big ninja character in the United States, went around and made a deal with all the magazines, Black Belt magazine and all the other karate magazines that there were in the time in the 80s, and said they'd not let anybody do any ninjutsu except him. There were several people like Ron Duncan in New York who was teaching ninjutsu, and Robert Bussey, who was I think in Indiana someplace, he was teaching ninjutsu, and both of them had gone to Japan and learned ninjutsu and come back to the States and not really told anybody that they had learned ninjutsu because it was still a secret art at that time. When Stephen Hayes started talking about it and bringing it out as a style, he basically cornered the market by making illegal deals with these magazines and attracting people like me and Ron Duncan and Robert Bussey and trying to put us all out of business because what he was teaching was not real ninjutsu. He was the one that brought out the whole Kujikiri, was a hand meditation symbol that the ninja used, like this was some big secret. It's not a big secret. He just made out like it was a big secret so that he can make more mysticism out of the ninjutsu thing and make more money. And so I met Stephen Hayes. Stephen Hayes is a nice guy. I've talked to him several times. What I've seen of him doing stuff ain't squat compared to what I can do.
(1982) is when I started. I started my martial arts when I was in the service. Went to a seminar, and it was Stephen K. Hayes, and he had just come back from Japan and was big Bujikan, wonderful, changed the world, ninjutsu martial arts. And I'm on Facebook, and I was looking at some stuff, and this idiot from Thailand starts talking to me. And I say that affectionately because we're pretty good friends now. I don't think we go a single day without something back and forth. We were talking for about probably 6 months to a year, and then he says, hey, I've been talking to this Anthony Cummings, and he's translating this book, and it's a bunch of old scrolls. And I says, well, I'll check it out. So I bought a book, started reading the big red book, Book of Samurai, and then I went back and I said, I'm going to get this Banshin Shukai, and I'm going to get the Shoninki, and he's got all these scrolls, and this is all the stuff I was interested in back in the 80s. It's nice that it goes beyond the physical kick and punch, 1-step, 2-step kind of drills. There's more to think about. Anthony brings daily life into the samurai ninja martial arts.
Now, I moved to Japan to find the history of the ninja and go train with these ninjas. And over a period of about 4 years, I came to the conclusion that they were all fake. The concept of the ninja is based on an amalgamation of old legends, comics, and anime and manga. So the modern image of the ninja is broken down into about 5 parts. The black outfit with the black mask, the shuriken or ninja death stars, the sword on the back that's straight, the magic ritual of Kujikiri, where you draw lines in the air, and last is the enemy of the samurai. Everybody thinks that the ninja are the enemies of the samurai. These together are the modern myth of what is a ninja. The problem is, it's totally wrong. So these images, they started in the 20th century and there was a ninja boom in Japan. So about 1910, the idea of ninjas as a sort of fantasy figure became massive in Japanese culture all the way past World War II. Then eventually they start popping up in the West. First of all is in James Bond, You Only Live Twice. Ninja hits the screen. You also see it in the TV drama called Shogun, where the ninja really first starts to become massively popular. And now the word ninja is almost in everything. Blenders, food blenders are called ninja. Kawasaki ninja bikes. You see them in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Cowabunga! Everything like that. It's everywhere. And of course, lots of really bad B-movies that came out in the West, including lots of stories about the ninja.
Those are the movies that got me started. When I was in the service, there wasn't much to do. You know, you did your 10-hour day and you sat in your bucks and waited for the next day, right? Well, there was a little movie theater that was within walking distance, and Enter the Ninja was playing. So I walked down there and saw it and said, I want to be like that guy with the mustache. You know, he was cool. There was really nothing mystical about it, what was in that movie. Some of it was stretched, but it was like, now that's martial arts to me. You know, that's military. Espionage, the subterfuge, the sneaking in, destroying a target, you know, all that good stuff. Defending yourself by any means necessary. You know, when I was in the service, that was the kind of stuff I was, you know, interested in.
If they actually looked at what he's telling us, the ninja's actually far better than what we previously thought, in my opinion. I think it's not some person who stands there and does these fighting moves. It's someone who gets a job done in an amazing way. I think it's magical what he's done, and if it wasn't for him, we'd still be living this like fantasy of like a somersaulting black clad sort of like fake ninja basically. And I think I think it's been brilliant what he's done, but a lot of people don't like what he's done because of it.
So this is a very old scroll. This is 1600s, and I bought this scroll because of this element here. Basically what ninjas would do would put that in the eaves of a house and they would dangle this to the floor, and at a certain time the idea is that this touches the floor because it's just above it, and when that touches the floor, the inhabitants of the house have fallen asleep and the entire house is asleep, which means ninjas can infiltrate. The reason people are fascinated with a ninja is actually very simple. It's the same reason why people are fascinated with James Bond. If you mix a commando with a spy and give them a cool name and then an iconic look, you've got a winning formula. So James Bond, he is a commando because he does all of those things. He's also a spy. Everybody knows the name James Bond now, and if you see a tuxedo and a gun, it's James Bond. It's the same as the ninja. It's the same thing, and that is why they are popular to this day.
I think, you know, we generally enjoy fantasy things more, I think, as humankind, I guess. We like our stories, and, you know, it's like the difference. You have the stories about regular knights, and then you have the stories about the magic wielding knights. You see more of those ones. I think it's the same thing. We like to pretend. I think we all do.
Welcome to Bonus Day.
So now you've got people who come into the martial arts world and say, okay, I want to learn about the ninja and I want to learn how to fight like a ninja. So they come along and they've got a choice between the 80s and 90s version, which of course is modern, and what I produce, and they open the books and they're excited, ready to learn ninja death touches. It's just not there. Star charts, how to break into houses, ancient rituals, how to spy on other people, and they're like, but I'm here to fight. So the only choice they've got is to go either to a Japanese martial art, which now become very weak and very soft, or to mixed martial arts and go into the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But that leaves my research in a suspended place in the middle where nobody's interested, because they come to fight like ninjas, but they go away unsatisfied. Now we have the Bujinkan organization. They are the biggest. Now they started with a Japanese man from the early to mid 20th century, and he's called Takamatsu, or Takamatsu Sensei as he's known. And he created 3 ninja schools based on comics and books. So he mixed a bit of history, a bit of comics, a bit of martial arts. He just mixed it all together and he created the Togakure school, which became their prominent one. And he passed this on to a man called Masaki Hatsumi. Now he is the man who taught Stephen Hayes, who brought it to the West. Now, of course, it exploded at this point and he became very famous and very rich. Now from there, it's trickled down and it's broken off and it's broken into lots of different factions, but that makes up the bulk of modern ninja enthusiasts. This break-off also includes organisations like Genbukan and Jinenkan, which all come from the same place, and they're often known as Takamatsu Den, which means traditions from Takamatsu. The problem is they claim to go back to the 1100s, and when you look at their history, it doesn't match Japanese history. My reaction was to try and get everyone interested in ninjas, and those that did remain interested in ninja, I actually said, well, let's come together. Let's band together as one group. And I spoke to everyone, I spoke to all factions and I said, let's come together, let's make one group of historical ninjutsu research. They hated each other. That group hates this group hates that group. They would not get on. And I was the central focus. And then a lot of the time they turn their attention onto me. And there's something which I term the Bujinkan Wars. Now the Bujinkan is a large organisation. In fact, it's the largest ninja organisation in the world. And I was targeted by these people for years. Hate videos, hate emails, threats, death threats. All sorts of things were coming my way. And I had to battle with them to try and support historical ninjutsu because, of course, my research means they're wrong and they lose a lot of money.
To the West, the biggest problem is people are hyper defensive. They have the idea of the ninja, of what a ninja is, and immediately they want to fight. Immediately they will fist fight you because, of course, in the West, the fantasy is linked to martial arts. So it's a lot of people who practice martial arts. So in the West, it's like people are actually want to physically harm you to defend this thing that this fantasy that they believe.
He was unknown. I mean, face it, nobody knew who Anthony Cummings was. And all of a sudden, he starts jumping on this bandwagon that ninjas didn't fly through the air. Ninjas didn't do this, ninjas didn't do that. They were just normal people. And it attacked everybody's Hollywood fantasy and the romantic idea of ninjas fighting samurais and the oppressed versus the oppressor. And when people started to realize that, they get upset. People have their beliefs and they don't want to let go of them.
Even if they have a fake path, it's still a path. And so they find some value in it. So for example, even they're studying fake shinobi ways. They're just studying martial arts while wearing a mask. Then they have an emotional connection to those life events. And they come to associate those life events' value with the value of shinobi, even though it's not really shinobi.
he's actually created a little bit of chaos. I mean, he killed the ninja for me, definitely, but it wasn't until he explained what it really was that makes the magic actually come alive. And it was like, a lot of people have had this idea of the ninja absolutely destroyed by his contributions.
And of course, everybody dumps on his research because they don't want to believe it. It's all a question, really, when you come right down to it, of what you choose to believe. And this is the thing, is that you can waste your time arguing with these people and lose your focus, or you can just keep doing what you know is right and let nature take its course.
So throughout the 20th century, the Japanese had what is termed as the three major ninja scrolls. That's the Bansen Shukai, the Shoninki, and the Shinobi Hiden, sometimes known as Nimpiden. Now those three scrolls were famous from about the 1950s to about the year 2000. And all of these Japanese masters would cherry pick small sections of these, get them translated, and then spout them out as words of wisdom. But they would only pick the bits that fit their actual agenda. And in truth, and now we've published all three of those and they're all available for the world, people have read them and they've gone, oh, that doesn't quite fit, and that's not what we expected, and that's been manipulated. But now the truth is out and they can't go back. They've said, and everybody knows in Japan, those are the main documents that we work from to find historical ninjutsu. So in Japan today, not many people are interested in historical ninjas. They're just not so interested. It's actually much less than the West. So when a historical book on ninja comes out in Japan, it sells nowhere near the amount of copies they sell in the US, UK, things like that. But what they are interested in Japan is the hyper ninja sense, you know, pinks and blues on the screen and shurikens coming across and lots of people shouting and leaping. And even to this day, there are historical researchers that are embedded in the tourist industry. And instead of finding the truth, they're more interested in presenting the image of the ninja as this cliche comic cartoon.
And this conflict isn't even in just the West. You have Japanese people, Japanese researchers, Japanese professors. People are at odds. You have multiple factions with their own variations. You have people that are sort of like the pure fantasy, like the people who are like, oh, we are a martial arts school and we're the last shinobis, we're the last ninja, blah, blah, blah. We have those. It seems like everybody approaches the topic with some kind of agenda or bias, or, you know, something that they're searching for. And that's not just in the West. You also find that in Japan as well.
So if you want to know what a ninja really looked like in the 1500s, you have to zoom in on a part of Japan. In the middle of all that, there's a warlord. Around him, he's got his close retainers. Around them, they've got their army and they're waiting. The ninja is a handful of people inside of that army. And they interact with everyone and they're all there together. Now, the ninjas should have a direct connection to their lord. And they talk to each other and they form secrets, they do spying, they've got plans, they've got espionage. So you wouldn't be looking at the ninja somewhere else. The ninja is in the room with you. The ninja is in the officer's mess. The ninja is waiting to make his move. He's never some fictional character dressed in black hiding in the shadows somewhere else. That just isn't true of any warrior society. So the ninja, well, they are a commando spy and they seem to have originated from about the 1300s and they seem to have finished in about the 1800s, and they were hired by individual warlords in Japan. They are called daimyo, so the head samurai, and within the samurai army, these ninjas are saboteurs, commandos, infiltrators, spies, espionage agents, and they will either be hired in secret so that nobody knows who they are, or they're hired in public so people do know who they are and they march with the army. So if you actually go back to old Japan, every time you look at a province or a domain, some of the people there are ninjas that guard the lord or go out and scout around before the army moves out, and some of them are thrown off to distant provinces to work in shops or to work as any type of business ready for when the army move to war, and they can then set things on fire, infiltrate and get into the local society. And now I've realised that the ninja are actually samurai, and they're doing samurai things. They're just one type of samurai. So I looked through all my scrolls and I found one set of scrolls which belonged to a school called Natori Ryu. And this involved one of the ninja scrolls, the most famous one, the Shoninki. So I set about collecting everything we had. I found the grave of the old master. Even the temple didn't know they had his grave. We found the original family and we showed them everything we've got, and we said, okay, we're going to reopen this as a samurai school of war, including the arts of the ninja. May we have your blessing? I'm going to take it to the West. They gave us their blessing. We had all the ceremonies, and now we've published the Book of Samurai series so that for the first time we can produce an entire real samurai school with ninjas in it for the Western world to understand and enjoy. Because this is the death tablet here for Natori Sanjuro Masazumi, and he wrote this, which is True Path of the Ninja, and this was my starting point to go into the world of the ninja. Because this death name means a person who studies so deeply it is like water dropping onto rocks until it wears everything away, i.e. the person has gone to the bottom of all knowledge. So why should you study the ways of the ninja? In essence, the ways of the ninja are dark, evil, manipulative. So why would we go to that? And there are many things in the world that people study, for example, yoga. And the idea is that we're trying to find ancient wisdom, bring it to the forefront, get rid of anything that really shouldn't work in today's society, find the positive aspect and go forward. So with yoga, people often get healthy, get fit, good diet, flexible. Well, with the ninja, what happens is you start to understand how people in the world are trying to manipulate you. Once you understand the fundamentals of manipulation, deception, you realise that the adverts on TV, things on the side of buses, you're walking around in a world full of deception, and it creates a barrier for you. It creates a blockage, and you can say, nah, that's not true, that's not right. However, there are some side effects. When your friends tell white lies, or you're in family situations, you start to analyse and look at people and you think, that's wrong and that's not right. So the deeper you go into the Japanese art of espionage, the harder it is to form relationships with people who are obviously trying to manipulate you, which is almost nearly everyone, even if they're not doing it for negative reasons. So you have to be careful when you step into this world.
You just move from one to the next. You just start with little physical things like calligraphy, writing, candle making. Then you move to the bigger things. Large scale military movement. That's not martial arts, but it is. We nowadays think of martial arts as kicking and punching, personal one-on-one combat. Martial arts is much bigger than that. If you have 50,000 men, you have to control 50,000 men. That's still martial arts. And that includes feeding them, moving them, housing them, clothing them. That's all martial arts. It's just a bigger picture.
You can't actually be a samurai, you can't actually be a ninja. So what we try to do is incorporate those teachings into our modern life. And of course, you have to adapt for modern times. However, we also have to symbolically keep what it means to be a samurai, what it means to be a ninja. Now, a lot of people will put Japanese swords on their wall, but I'm English, I'm very proud of being English. So what I did is follow the way of the samurai, in that they use what's called daisho, which is two swords. You have a main sword and a short sword. So here above my fireplace, as a symbolic gesture of my following the warrior path, is my pair of English swords. There are physical aspects of the ninja and there are mental aspects of the ninja, and both existed. However, even ancient masters like Chikamatsu Shigenori, who was a ninja himself, he said that everybody looks at the physical arts of the ninja, throwing a grappling hook, climbing a wall, digging under, explosives, poisons. He says even the ninja of his day in the 1700s would focus only on that. But he said, while that keeps you physically fit and it's entertaining and it is sometimes needed, it's always the mental focus first. Remember, the ideogram for ninja means a person of endurance and a person of stealth. So in that case, you have the physical, the stealth, but also the endurance and the mental capacity.
So I think the best thing we can learn from the ninja is they teach us to detach the mind from emotion, and if you are still attaching yourself to this fantasy, you've learned pretty much nothing from the ninja, and there's no chance you can actually move forward with the ninja in itself.
I have to be prepared for just about every circumstance that comes up during my jobs every day. So I have a van, and I'm the white van man according to the people from England, that's prepared for any eventuality all day long. So it's one of those things where it's just a natural flow of where I'm at as far as my everyday life. It's just part of who I am. You know, it's preparing for each and every circumstance.
I knew when I started this I'd be writing books, and then the fakes, the claimants, everybody out there trying to sell the ninja image would use my work. But on one hand, I want them to do that, because if they're selling my work as theirs, at least they're getting it right. But on the other hand, it now makes it really quite difficult to work out who is and who is not correctly selling ninjutsu. Before it was easy, you could just see it was a dojo, they had black gis on or t-shirts and a black belt, and they had karate suits on and teaching you hand-to-hand combat. But now some of them have started to get a bit cleverer. They wear traditional Japanese kit, they teach multiple subjects with ninjutsu embedded, and they hide their lies inside of that. So you have to be careful. Now I understand they're running a business, and of course it is their business, but they're also saying to everyone that they're a sensei, that they're a teacher, and they've got historical information. So my advice would be, if you're a student, make sure you know what you're paying for. If you are paying an instructor, a sensei, for historical ninjutsu, you have to be sure it's historical. If you're happy and they say, oh, this is just a fantasy, it's costume play, it's role play, it's not based on anything real, that's absolutely fine. We all spend our money on what we want to spend it on. But if you're a student looking for historical ways, be very, very careful who you give your money to.
From 2007 to 2015, there were no other Western researchers that were putting out historical ninja documents and videos and audio files. Now there is, but it was just Anthony and me for the longest time. So it creates a body of knowledge to actually provide the real history, because before people like Anthony or me or some of the other researchers out there, there really wasn't any voice that was just definitively putting material out there that was actually explaining and showing the real history. Even in Japan, there was a severe lack of proper historical research, or actual professors or historians writing about shinobi things that was historically accurate. So there's been sort of a shift. And I'm not going to say that perchance like Anthony or my work is the cause of that in Japan, but I would definitely say that it's undeniable that Anthony's work, my work, is the factor that pushed it in the West. I
tell you, these guys, it's slow going for them. You know, they've been pushing this for 5-10 years now, I think. Anthony started 10 years ago. I got involved probably pretty close to 5 years ago. Is it slow going? Well, yeah, it's slow going, because we're not ramming anything down everybody's throat. We're not going to seminars and calling people out and challenging them to fights. We're just saying, here's the truth. Just take a look. It's the written word from 1600. That's all it is. But it's still important. If you're a martial artist, this should be important. This book should be important to you. And it's great that Anthony had decided to translate it.
But this has been one of the most fundamental texts for modern ninjutsu, basically, because while it was written in 1681, it became famous in Japan in the 1910s, and everybody in Japan has basically been copying from this book to understand what ninjutsu is.
I think if Anthony hadn't brought out the translations, that, you know, the world would have been for the lesser. Like I said, I think it's so important to get, you know, more translations out there. And, you know, he's so gung-ho about it. He gets out there and finds stuff and gets stuff out. And even if people disagree with him, if that drives them to do more translations, and if their translations do end up better, then great. You know, I'm not, you know, sometimes you just need the dominoes to fall a certain way.
My actual goal is to get the ninja absolutely historically understood in the West, so that if people are writing books on history, they're correct. If they're making a film, now while it's entertainment, it's at least got some element of reality. Even down to when people make fantasy games, comics, and it's all very, you know, fantastic, as long as they come from the seed of historical knowledge. But at the same time, one of my major goals is to form a museum in Japan. I would love Japan to have a museum dedicated to samurai and ninja. What most people don't realize is when you go to Japan, there's no real main central hub for Westerners to come along and read about what are the ninja and what are the samurai. It's just separated all over the land. Ninja scrolls are relatively rare in Japan, and one of the problems is that collectors keep them to themselves, libraries keep them to themselves. Some you can see, some you can't see. So one of my goals is to collect all the ninja scrolls in existence and have them handwritten out, and then in the end donate them to a university. That means anybody who wants to research after me can happily come and see them all. So here's the 16 ninja tools. Scroll that's now on a wall in Japan in one of the families. Now this has been handwritten by Miyako Koizumi, and I've illustrated it so people can see which tools they're talking about. My focus is in a place called Wakayama, and they kindly awarded me the title of official ambassador or official tourist ambassador for Wakayama, and I have a good relationship with them, and hopefully do more documentaries as we go along. So while I may or may never be able to persuade the Japanese to open a museum on samurai, what I can do is make sure I collect all the scrolls. I can then have them typed up to check all the ideograms. We can have them then handwritten out again and backed, and then I can donate them to some museum somewhere in Japan, so that future researchers who come after me can follow on in my footsteps and make sure they've got access to all the historical data. when people say, where did I learn my martial arts, it's absolutely through Masaaki Hatsumi, through the Bujinkan, and me and Jay Kane did all of our training within the Bujinkan, and we spent years doing it, and I have never ever once said I disagree with their martial arts system. All I'm saying is that ninjutsu has nothing to do with hand-to-hand combat. That's it. I've never disrespected their martial arts. It's just simply the fact that it's not historical.